for the Historic Commission meeting, November 21st. A few items, point of order to start, just a reminder to us up here to turn on the mics and for you down there. And if anybody comes to the podium, if would like to present, we just ask that you go up there, use that mic, introduce yourself, and provide your address as well. So we will do that. For anybody on the live stream, any of those comments won't be addressed as questions as part of the process of the meeting. So a reminder there as well. So we'll jump into the agenda tonight. Item number 1 is the approval of the minutes from the October 17th meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, motion carries. On the agenda, item number 2, they have withdrawn their application, so we will not be addressing 704, 706 West Vine Street tonight. So we will jump into item number 3, 347 North Queen Street. This is a return from previous application, which was when? April? February? Okay, February application, and I guess...
Oh, no, I was wrong. I was looking at February 2007.
It is April, from April 18th, so you guys are set up to go. So if you want to, okay, reintroduce yourselves and reintroduce the project, and if you can go through, the project, but specifically the updates, that would be helpful as well. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Gary Weaver from Tippett Weaver Architects. With me tonight, I have the project developer, Matt Richards, and also Ethan Knopsnyder from our office as well. And as you said, this project was presented conceptually in April. We sort of walked through kind of background on the project, how we arrived at our general conceptual solution at that time. And so some of what we have to present tonight might be a little bit of a refresher or
Okay.
sort of.
If I can interrupt you real quick, just want to clarify one thing. Susanna, well, 2 things. One, the planning information that you have here was copy pasted from additional staff reviews in blue.
The planning context?
Context, yes.
Douglas Smith
From
prepared
Douglas,
that.
yep, okay. And then can you hit a high level of your review before I turn it back over to them?
Well, I wrote my review based on what was submitted, but then the architect is going to present updated drawings tonight.
Great.
And plans, which you have hard
you
copies
handed
that
out
has
here.
gone down the
Okay.
table.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Apologize.
We're good?
Yep, go
Yeah,
ahead.
okay.
Sorry.
So some of this may be sort of a rehash of what we did previously, but we'll take you through it just to sort of give you the background and kind of an update on things. So project site is North Queen Street, 347 North Queen. It's diagonal from the Belvedere, which obviously the Belvedere is here. The yellow area that we're showing here in the center is where the site is located. As we look down the street, we can see some other buildings like the Keppel building that's down here. Somewhere down in here is where the slot is, where the old Zapping Company building used to be. Gives you a little bit of the context. Yeah. I thought it was a little too loud, but yeah. So here again, just giving you the location on the larger city map, the yellow block in here is the site that we're talking about. And then as we blow it up a little bit, this is the existing condition. It is a surface parking lot. So a little bit of planting around the perimeter, but otherwise parking. It was a piece of the Northgate condominium development that included everything that surrounds it, which is this area in here. That included a warehouse structure back in here that was renovated and added onto, additional floor that was added, and sort of a vertical circulation element that's at the north side of that. Series of townhouses along here, and then several structures here that were renovated as part of that project as well. This parcel was withdrawn from that condominium and is no longer a part of that condominium. Again, just a site plan of the existing conditions there. This is the zoning map that we wanted to share and sort of outline. This is the central CB1 district. It's sort of center of the city, highest density area that's really targeted for higher density growth and the main commercial core of the city. Outside of that, you can see is the CB area. And as we move north of the site, we have the MU district up in here. Within this district, the height limitation is 150 feet. We can do 100% lot coverage. There's no limitation on number of stories. As we move north into MU, north of our site, that is MU district, and I think is limited to, I believe, 65 feet and 5 stories. And so this is an aerial view where we're just sort of looking at, the proposed building, and very roughly have shown, rough massing of the building that we're proposing here. We identify a number of other buildings within the general vicinity of the site. We start over here with City View Apartments. It's 1 block away. It's a 6-story building that's right here. Number 2 is the Keppel Building, which is right here, and that's also shown down in here. That's a 65-foot tall building that's in that location, about a half a block further south from where we're proposing to build this. Number 3 is the Candy Factory Building, which is back in here, which is a 4- and 6-story structure. Again, about a half a block away. It's on the alleyway back in here. Lancaster House North, obviously a housing block that was done in here, clearly within the CB district. It's 115 feet tall. I think it's 12 stories. And then last building that we identify here is the Lancaster Press Building, historical building, just recently renovated. That actually tops out at 82 feet to the top of the cornice, and then there's obviously the roof deck on top of it, which pretty much matches the height of the building we're proposing. As we move on to this view, this is looking north, and so again, the rough block of the building that we're proposing in here. And as we look north, you can see, a number of larger scale structures, large footprint structures, like the parking garage that's over here, and then of course all of the hospital buildings that are up here that are of considerable scale, and then the City View Apartments again, which is over here, 1 block east of us. The rest of the Northgate project is the warehouse structure that's back in here, the townhouses that are over in here, and then of course the 2 buildings that face North Queen in this location. And again, this is just sort of to get down at street level and look at the site. So across the top, we're showing North Queen Street. The site location is at this point, and as we go down, we didn't correct these photos for parallax or anything like that, but you can get some sense of the built environment along that street. The opposite side of the street, so again, you get a sense of the context that's there, and then a larger view from North Queen looking at the site. Obviously, the site's right in here. And then as we go to Lemon Street, again, site location is here. Looking north on Lemon is what we have across the street here, and then larger view of the site in this location. More site photos. So we've been working on a couple projects in the city where we're doing infill, and on many of these projects, we sort of try and construct what the existing patterns are of the street, try and understand what's there as a starting point. And so we did go in and did a reconstruction of North Queen Street down here. We happen to have architectural drawings of some of these buildings. We had very gracious cooperation from another architect who provided some of these elevations. And we actually worked on some of the other buildings that are in this block. The ones we did not have, we went back and photographed with, and if you look at these very closely, there's a 6-foot person that stands in all of these. And so we scaled them all with that 6-foot person and then parallax corrected them so we could get a continuous elevation. And you can kind of see the character of that street, the patterns of the street. The things that we typically look for in this are the modules of how the buildings were developed. And so you can obviously see there's this pink module that gets repeated on many of the properties on this street. That would be some of these that are not identified in here. There's the yellow module, which is really a double of the pink. and then there's a couple of these thin, sort of narrow pieces as well. And so, those are patterns that we're sort of looking at on how we might break down the facade of something that we're working on over here. The other thing that we were very tuned into is this entire street level, the whole way down the block. Everything has a storefront on it except for, I believe, the Guild of Craftsmen building here. I think all the others do have that storefront that runs along the street, and it kind of varies from about 12 to 14 feet tall. And so again, that was something that we felt was important to kind of learn from as we think about what the composition of this corner building is. And you can also see, sort of the same, architectural relationship on the upper level up there as well. Other thing that we look at on these is really patterns of windows, amount of wall space, proportions of the openings to the wall and so forth. These are some very early studies kind of trying to figure out what the building would be. You can obviously see there was, a storefront level that was at the first floor. This is North Queen up above here. I think we always liked this notion, or thought, the notion of sort of a masonry framework that we were working with, and then some modulation of the windows within that masonry framework. We originally were dealing with a piece in here that was sort of this connector piece between the new building and the existing buildings, where this piece was set back somewhat, and at that time, I think we thought of this largely as a glass piece. I think some of the feedback we got in our conceptual review was that seemed a little foreign, and that the Historic Commission seemed to not really prefer the more glass connector that was back there. But even at this point, we were looking at breaking down the scale of the building, breaking it into pieces, stepping down the overall height of the building. With that, I'm just going to quickly take you through the plan. So North Queen Street is along the left-hand side of this, lemon across the top. The main entrance for the residential portion of the building is right in the center of this elevation on North Queen. We come into an entrance vestibule and a mail and parcel room, resident lobby, and then a central vertical circulation core that's at this location. We have another stair tower that's at the south end, and you can see this is pulled back from the face of the building about 8 feet in here, where we have that stair tower. We're keeping a space on the first floor here that's a fitness center, where we expect to have that as an amenity space for the building, and we preserve the corner and the glass that wraps around this corner for a commercial space, fronting on both Lemon and North Queen. As we come around Lemon, there's currently a driveway entrance at this location, which is considerably wider than this because there's an in lane and an out lane with a booth in between them. We're still maintaining this access, or two-way access from Lemon Street, and then this parking is under the building and actually comes out behind the building back in here, where we get about 15 spaces for the residents above. As we go up to the upper floors, everything from floor 2 through 7 is residential units. They're organized around a double-loaded central corridor. Again, the vertical core that comes up through here, the stair tower at the south here. The units vary in size from the smallest studio unit that's here, which I believe is about 430 square feet, I believe, something like that. The largest unit is on the corner. And again, I forget what the number on that is, but it's roughly 700 and some square feet.
722.
Yeah. Most of the units are set up as one bedroom, smaller one bedrooms, and then sort of medium-sized one bedrooms, and then of course the corner unit that's here. The back corner of the site is open, back in here. And as we go to the top level, the roof level, we do have the stair tower and elevator coming through the roof. We have a small amenity space, a roof terrace that's off of that. With that, then we'll go into the current layout of the elevations. And so this would be along North Queen Street. And again, you can see, storefront area along the street. Some of the feedback that we got in the conceptual review was it seemed like the thought was that the continuous storefront being treated the same seemed too long and too repetitive. And so we've sort of broken that down. I think originally when we were looking at this facade, we were thinking about sort of a masonry framework that extended across the entire facade and had a very similar treatment of windows that extended across the whole facade. And since that time, we've really broken it down to, there's always this notion of breaking the scale down to have it kind of appear as two buildings on this elevation, but we've been more literal in the way we're now sort of carrying this out, where we've actually changed the window patterns and separated the windows in this particular portion of the building. We're talking about a different color of brick for this portion of the building. And then obviously that extends down, slightly different color on the base of the this portion of the building, and the storefronts dealt with a little bit differently. In this area, we essentially have a grid of the masonry that makes both the piers and the spandrels. We have another type of brick that's in these sort of infill panels before or between the windows, and we'll talk about some of the detailing of that when we look at some of the larger scale details. We did originally have a canopy piece that went the whole way across the commercial space and turned the corner. That's been cut back to really just identifying the main entrance to the residential piece that's here. The entrance to the commercial space has been moved in from the corner to be more central in this location. We moved away from the largely glass stair tower that's set back in here, and we're now thinking of that as a fiber cement panel that's on the face of that. As we turn the corner and we're along Lemon Street, again, treatment of the corner building in a similar fashion. When we got to this portion of the building, we essentially changed all of this to a different colored brick, and that brick, in fact, comes the whole way down to the sidewalk and sort of changes materials at the base here. This is the garage entrance from Lemon Street, and then these will be infill panels of a fabricated metal screen in this location. We are changing to a different material as we get to the top, and again, the idea for this was to essentially have a cornice line to bring the overall scale of the building down, go to a different material at the back. There is a slight offset at that point, and we're hoping that by making that change, the upper portion of the building recedes somewhat. And then you can see on this side, we've actually brought this down lower. I think in the earlier scheme, we were at a higher level here, and so this whole piece has been brought down somewhat lower than what was on there previously. As we go around the building, this is the south elevation, and so the canopy at the entrance we're seeing here. This is the area above the parking area that we're seeing on the back portion of that wing. We're wrapping the brick from the front around the stair tower at this point. We are preserving a large end elevation. Since this is a stair tower and we have this large masonry piece up here, we are preserving this area as a possible area where we could have some public art piece or something like that that could be up in this area of the building. As we get beyond here back in this area, I think we've now gone to a stucco finish on these areas, and I think we also are looking at a stucco finish or a metal panel for these up in here. And then this would be the east elevation. You can see that the brick turns the corner to a location here, and from this point back, we have a stucco that pretty much matches the color of the brick. Then we have the metal siding above, and then as we come back in here, again, the stucco finish for that. And so this is obviously the material palette that we're currently looking at, and it looks a little bit washed out on the screen, but you can see the materials here on the table. And so when we look at the table, I'm going to have to sit down and point. So along North Queen Street, we have this sort of buff-colored brick. That's the first building that we see as we're moving north on North Queen Street. The corner building is this sort of medium gray color, and we have two different bricks on that. We have a sort of textural difference there where we have the textured brick that's in the infill panels between the windows. The material that's over on the my right, your left, is the cast stone base that we're looking at. And as we turn onto Lemon Street, we do have the more terracotta or red brick that's on the Lemon Street facades. The windows are going to be a dark gray or black color. The storefront will be the same. And the metal siding up above is that sort of gray color as well. So I'm just going to quickly take you through some of the larger scale drawings to kind of talk about the detailing. So this is obviously the storefront at the base. We've got the cast stone sort of cornice piece here. We've got the piers. Once we get above that, we have brick, and these vertical piers on the, I don't know why I keep getting that. The vertical piers actually project beyond the spandrels about 3 inches. And so they're proud of the spandrel. Spandrel's set back a little bit, so there's a little bit of a shadow line that we get along these vertical piers. The windows are set in here, and we have a shadow box frame that runs around these. And so the frame of the window actually projects beyond the face of the masonry the whole way around. And then we have these spandrel panels that are back in here where we're currently showing different texture brick and the different coursing of the brick on those. As we move to the next slide, this is the transition between the brick portion of the building. At the top of the building, this projected pier comes up and goes across and sort of is all on the same plane. The spandrel panels are set back slightly. The infill panels at the windows are here, and we have a kind of vertical or a little horizontal piece, both top and bottom, and then the shadow box that runs around the windows. And that shadow box also continues up above, and all of the siding kind of finishes into that. We put these images in here just to talk about how we're dealing with the entrance into the garage. And one of the things that Matt was very focused in on was what the door to the garage looked like. And so, there was a push to get the upward acting sectional doors with the glass at the main entrance. And so that's kind of where we're currently thinking that's the entrance into the garage area. We're looking at a number of different ways of dealing with the panels that are on either side, or the screens that are on either side of that door. Some way of laser cutting a pattern into those so it doesn't feel like just a louver grill or something like that. We've been looking at some other metal screen systems as well, but that's what's planned for the infills on either side of the garage entry on Lemon Street. And then we go through a couple images just to kind of give you a better sense of where we started from and what we're trying to recreate. The building to the right obviously is one that we all love. It's probably at a slightly different budget than where we're at on this particular project, but it's a very similar treatment where you can see, there's a framework that runs around the windows, the grouped windows, this sort of panel system that goes next to the windows. In this particular case, it was a wood panel system. And another image of a similar project over here where, again, you have the masonry frame of the building, the windows that are set within that, within an infill panel. And then the next one that we show is actually quite similar to the detailing of what we're proposing, where again, you have the windows like this, where the windows are ganged. We do have a louver for the HVAC system. There's this shadow box that runs around the windows, and then a recessed panel here that's a different material. And so that's very similar to the detailing of what we're proposing for the building. And then the next slide just sort of shows you the detailing. This is cut through at one of the piers, and so you can see the piers are projected out. The brick finish returns around here, and then when we hit the windows, you can see we have this shadow box detail where these shadow box, I think on this portion of the building, are about 9 inches deep, so they project beyond the face of the brick piers about 3 or 4 inches, and then they're considerably larger on the other sides. When we get to the flatter portions of the building, the detail is more like this, where there's about a 4-inch reveal as opposed to this deeper reveal. And then down below, we show a mock-up of, this is actually an Intus window, which is the window system that we're looking at using. It has this sort of shadow box frame that runs around it, and this actually, sorry about that, this actually was a mock-up that was done for another job, and so it includes materials that are not going to be used on this particular job, but it does give you some sense of how the window, the shadow box works with the materials meeting it. This is the current rendering of, what we're proposing from the intersection of essentially standing at the front door of the Belvedere looking across the street. So that's really what we have for our part of the presentation. We're open to answering any questions.
Okay, great, thank you. Quick question, how many units are in there currently?
72 units.
Okay.
72 units on 6 floors, 12 on a floor.
Open it up, any comments, questions, concerns? I can keep going, I guess, and get it rolling. Just starting backwards, I think, I think the materials seem appropriate, and the different color palettes, I think, work to break up the building a bit. I appreciate the detailing and the presentation of that, and I think that all works pretty well. So there's 72 units, you have, did you say 15 spaces underneath?
15 spaces.
Okay, 15 spaces underneath. It's going to be a look of the
One
dog.
accessible space, 15
Okay.
total, and everyone else, I assume, is going to park at the parking garage across the corner.
And then going back, I think, one of my comments early on, and it's hard to get past, is just the overall volume of it. So, I think and Suzanne had made some comments along those lines. Obviously, it would fit much better if it was 5 stories. I'm not sure that the material change on the top, I think, is helpful, but it doesn't do a ton when you look at the rendering. It even feels tall for Queen Street, and I appreciate the density. But it feels tall for Queen Street, but then I feel really bad about the Lemon Street facade, honestly, just in terms of the overall scale. I think the material change and some of the step down helps, but it is such a drastic change. And I think the zoning map is actually helpful because it's right next to the R4, which is, and I was looking
Actually,
over that
it's
zoning
next to
map. It's the only
MU.
place that really happens where you have, CB1 against R4. There's a CB usually around CB1, which I don't know the difference offhand. But
So I think the main difference between CB and CB1 has to do with the commercial use of
Okay.
the lower level.
the lower level, yeah.
But it is an unusual situation that, Matt and I both discussed where, typically you would have a CB zone that I guess sort of steps down in scale. And of course, north of us is the MU. And so that would be, sort of stepping things down in scale as you
Right.
go north.
So that, that map there is just, a little microcosm of what is happening, I think, with the presentation. So I don't know how everybody else feels about that, but I think, the project is great to have, and I think the design is generally good. The overall height is still, I think, the issue.
I think the height is an issue, but I think they've done the best they can with the design by transitioning the building height around the corner, using the smaller section and using red brick on the Lemon Street side, which is more friendly to the red brick row houses next to it. And I think you also have to consider that, this is a vacant site. It's a vacant lot, it's not, they're not proposing to demolish any buildings. And I think, with the limited land that we have in the city and the pressures of development and housing, you just maximize the use of those vacant sites. I think that's important.
A lot of times we hear that, the 72 units or whatever is critical to this project actually moving forward. I mean, we hear, and not that necessarily enters into whether it fits historically or not, but was there any consideration on making it 60 units or 50 units and, having a half a story up there or something like that?
I appreciate the question. We have looked at this project with every different type of unit count. We specifically went back and re-underwrote the financial models after our last presentation, based off of your feedback. And unfortunately, we don't think we will be able to secure financing for the project. It will not generate enough revenue based off of the cost of construction if we do not have the density that is here. Our intent when we entered into the contract to purchase this land was to do a 5-story building, but it proved financially infeasible. It was not the desired goal to go to 7 stories, but it is the only way that we can make it work and to secure funding to move forward.
Okay, thank you.
I think the financial environment has only gotten worse.
Much worse, yes.
So,
We did that drill as well.
What else? Other comments or concerns?
So I just wanted to kind of add to, I appreciate the breaking it up with the different materials. I definitely think that helps with the sizing, from my perspective, the scale at least. Stepping it down as you get both down the Lemon Street side and down the Queen Street side. So I think that's good. In terms of what you can do to descale this, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but make it a little bit more maybe appealing from a size perspective, I think you kind of hit the mark there. I just had a question maybe for the commission related to the paneling. So in the previous rendering, it was like a red brick with some wood horizontal panels, and now it seems to be just more monochrome across the surface. Do we think that's appropriate? Do we think a different color scheme? Because the brick's the same. The panels have the same color brick as the facade.
I don't recall there being a wood component.
Okay, it looks, just to compare, I'm not saying I love the wood either. I'm just saying at least it was differentiated, the panel from the facade in the previous, in April. So I didn't know if the conceptual. Yeah, so just the paneling.
Okay.
So just to confirm, that brick is the same brick that's in the
So what
facade?
we're looking at right,
Yeah.
what we're looking at right now are really, we're currently thinking it's a brick of the same color. There is a textural difference. There will be a difference in the coursing of the brick, where those panels are set up as a stack bond as opposed to a running bond, and so they're clearly an infill. And again, I sort of go towards, if I can get there. This one image where these are not stack bond in here, but of course there's a different coursing in here where these are, handled differently. There's more differentiation in the type of brick, and maybe that's an option, that we need to have more contrast between the two different types of brick.
Can you see the different bricks here? These are the two different bricks that he's talking about using.
And then one of them is run vertically.
One would be running vertically in a
Yeah.
stack bond, yeah.
I would actually argue against too much contrast. There's kind of a modern tendency to use too many different
Yeah.
materials. And using a limited palette of primarily brick, I think is more respectful to the neighborhood than introducing a lot of foreign modern materials.
And I do think, we've had internal discussions about the colors of the brick, the treatment of the brick, what the panels should be, whether they should be brick, whether they should be something else, whether it should be a sharp contrast, whether it should be something that's more subtle. And I think we've sort of landed on this notion that, have them be a similar color palette, but just subtly different. Maybe it includes a difference in the mortar for the two bricks as well, and that might make more of the change. Obviously, what's going to happen on this project is we're going to have mock-ups of all these intersections, so we really understand, exactly how all the materials work together, and there probably will still be some minor adjustments in, mortar selections, and maybe even, minor adjustments in brick selections at that time.
No, makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say I like your building scale context views. if you look at the southeast and again at the northeast views, when you're looking back in toward the heart of the city, I mean, you have the Keppel building, it's 65 feet, and that's just a couple of spaces down. Looking that direction, the height really doesn't, to me, seem that bad. Then you turn around and go to the northeast view, and the block just across from Lemon Street, yeah, you can tell there's a contrast to the building there. But at the same time, you don't see in that view off to the left, which you're showing, again, the press building and other buildings that would be off to the left there. And then you have LGH's buildings that are right there. It does kind of stand out to the adjacent block. It's right across from Lemon Street, but yet at the same time, there are abundant of large buildings throughout that whole area. So I personally don't have too much of an issue with the height. Because it's not like it's just all, 2 or 3 story buildings in that immediate area.
I mean, I think the other thing you can't overlook is, I don't really know when the zoning map was last redrawn, but clearly there was a very deliberate notion of how far up, the CB1 district wanted to extend, and someone, made the decision that it would be at this location. I mean, you can't overlook the fact that any sort of open lot or disused lot that's within the CB1 or CB district at this point establishes its value based on what you can actually build on it, which obviously relates to how many stories you can build. And I think it's quite probable that over time, other lots between the center of downtown and this lot will fill in with larger scale buildings. I think we're seeing it now. I mean, it's an evolution of, a city growing and infilling. So.
It just seems out of place on that southeast view. I mean, you could say that there's buildings here, there, and the Keppel building, but it just feels like it's out of place, height-wise.
How tall is your building compared to the
The top of our building is 82 feet,
Yeah,
the
so
same
it's
as
almost
the
20
Lancaster
feet.
Press building.
Yeah.
Right.
It's almost 20 feet big, taller.
Yep.
Um,
I think the Keppel building is roughly 65,
mhm.
based on, the scaling of the drawing.
Basically, Lemon Street is kind of the northern edge of our downtown, our commercial retail. You go beyond Lemon Street further north, and it's primarily residential.
And-
I mean,
Until you get to the hospital.
by establishing the zoning district in that way, I mean, that site was set up for a clash
Yeah.
at some point. You just happen to be the developer that is the victim of it.
But I would also argue that when it was established, they probably could have viewed it as an MU site if they wanted to. It was vacant at that time and they chose not to. And while none of us were there for that discussion, I'm sure the zoning was not adapted haphazardly because it never is. It is well thought out, probably litigated, and a lot of smart people put time into that. And so they decided that this site should be of somewhat higher density. And the last proposal for this site was 10 stories, and we are less than that. And that was 10 years ago.
That was
when there was
2007 or whatever. Yeah.
when there were less, buildings going up, and, there's this one that's going up a couple blocks south of us that I'm sure you guys looked at, which is 10, 11, 12 stories. Those projects will infill, and, they could come back taller than this in this area. This is really half of the height of the zoning district, and I would argue that they probably would have wanted it taller because that's what they zoned for.
I don't disagree with the logic of your argument. Where my struggle is the Secretary of Interior standards, which is what we're not here. We're not the zoning board.
Right.
And part of that is looking at the size and scale and proportion to the buildings around it. So I don't disagree that you're allowed to do this under zoning. I struggle with the massing. I don't think it's bad project. I don't think that, I mean, I think filling in underutilized space is the way to develop the city. I'm not against any of that. I did, after this came before us for conceptual, I started thinking about like the scale of buildings around town, and I did go down and look at the square and the Grice building, because that's giant compared to the buildings around it on Queen. And the difference that I see design-wise, because it doesn't feel that big as like when you're on the streetscape, and I don't know if it's because it's been there that long, but they actually matched the cornice to the building beside it, and then went more plain up above, and then did a bigger cornice up at the top. But looking at your design, it doesn't line up that way. I don't think it would work.
Yeah, look, Gary's pulling that up now. I think that's a respectful point. We could take a look at.
We obviously have this.
Quite a bit lower.
It would,
It's sort of stepping up to the corner.
okay. So that was the intent when you were,
Well,
was the steps?
Yeah, I think we always knew that what was being proposed was something that's larger in scale or taller in scale than the directly adjacent buildings. And so our thinking was really looking at a way where maybe it's tallest at the corner and then starts to step down to kind of get, closer to what's next to us. I mean, that really was the intent, in thinking about how the facade was dealt with.
The lower section on the south side, that is about the height and width of the Keppel building.
Actually, the Keppel building's more or less this height.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's about that height.
Yeah,
So
okay. But I think so also,
the width of this is pretty similar to the Keppel,
okay.
this piece right here, yeah.
But also I think that, they've transitioned, the fenestration changes, the openings get larger and wider, on the north end of the building. The section on the south has the narrower openings. It's more like the historic buildings, next to it. I think I think you've made a successful transition from the smaller buildings to the larger buildings. Yeah, I don't really have, the height isn't going to kill the project for me. Again, I look at it as, it's a vacant site. What you're proposing is allowed. Not that zoning, should dictate to the historical commission how we review projects, but I guess I just don't have an issue with it
Sure.
as some of the other members do.
I'd just like to follow up on that, just because I feel like when we were here for conceptual, one of the things that we were most concerned about was whether a 7-story structure was something that would be denied by this commission. And I feel like we fairly pointedly asked that question. And I think we came away from that meeting feeling like, no, 7 stories is an acceptable height for this site. I think there were questions about how we articulate that height and how we develop the facades. But I think when we left that meeting, we felt pretty sure that 7-story height was a height that was acceptable.
I think I'm going to turn it over and see if there's any public comment. If there's anybody that wants to make a comment, we'll give you like 3 minutes if you want to come to the microphone, introduce yourself and your address. Is there anybody that want to comment on this one?
Good afternoon. My name is Brad.
Can you see if the mic is on? There might be a button there.
How about
There
that?
you go. Thank
Can
you.
you hear me now? Yeah, thank you. My name is Brad Wolf. I live at 336 North Christian Street in Northgate, and I'm here with a number of the neighbors from that development, and we have very serious concerns with this project. And oftentimes when looking for future development, it pays to look at past development and some of the mistakes that were made. I was born and raised in Lancaster. My father was born and raised here, and I've seen this city evolve over the decades. And I've seen the downtown go through some pretty drastic changes over these decades. And during the 50s and 60s, Lancaster went through this urban renewal period where lots of beautiful buildings were torn down supposedly to make way for progress. And while these gentlemen are not proposing to tear a building down, putting up the wrong building in the wrong place is just as bad a mistake as tearing down a beautiful building, because that building is there forever. If this building goes through, it's going to be there long after all of us are gone. And people are going to walk by and wonder, what were those officials thinking? What were people thinking to put that building on that block in that place along all these other beautiful buildings that are there? What happened in Lancaster in the 50s and 60s was so egregious that they wrote a book about it. It's called A City Transformed, and it's about redevelopment in Lancaster City, and you all should read it if you haven't, because there's pictures in here, like the one in the front of the Hotel Brunswick being destroyed. And we all know what went up in place of these buildings just like that, these generic institutional-looking buildings made of faux brick masonry and things like that look entirely out of place to the rest of the block and the rest of the cityscape. People come to Lancaster City for the old world charm. They don't come to look at buildings like this. Now, we know that housing is an issue, but there's a place for buildings like this. And this block of North Queen Street is not the place, because this 300 block of North Queen Street is where the redevelopment of Lancaster occurred in the 1990s. This is where the shops began and the independent restaurants first began, and now it's turning into just another generic block you'd find in any city. And so I would urge you not to let past mistakes like other buildings that have gone up be your gauge for future decisions. To compare this to the Keppel building is really a strained argument. Yes, in size, but in terms of aesthetic value, there's no comparison. Anybody standing outside and looking at the Keppel building admires the building, and they know it fits in with the cityscape there. Looking at this, it does not fit in with the cityscape, and you all are charged with the historic integrity of the cityscape. And so you're not just talking about height, you're talking about whether the building belongs there. And it doesn't belong there. And the city officials who approved all this demolition that occurred in the 50s and 60s, their pictures are in this book. And this book is taught in colleges and universities now as to what not to do. And I'm guessing there's going to be another book written about Lancaster's revitalization and growth someday. And you don't want your pictures to be in that book, making these same decisions, because, it's terrible. It says down here, making way for progress, and you see the destruction that happened. So I'd urge you to please reconsider this. There's going to be lots of options for that spot. Lots of developers who will come up with lots of imaginative ideas to do something really nice on that corner. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Good evening. My name's Nancy Seiler, S-I-L-E-R, and I'm in the Queen Street Northgate building, the one you see on your right there. I'm on the third floor condo, so I'm on the third floor above the Supplement Place and Edward Jones. So I own the third floor. And we're a separate HOA from the rest of the Northgate folks. And our president couldn't be here. Kurt Moon is our president. He couldn't be here, and I missed the last meeting. So I just had a question on how close your proposed new building comes to our building. We couldn't tell from the drawings what the proximity was.
So you're in this building right here?
Correct.
Yeah, and so let me go back to the plan. And so your building would be right here.
Correct.
And so we are building up against the property line. We do have a stair tower here that's set back. And the corner of the new building would be at this location.
Okay. I don't know if you're aware, we've got a 5-foot easement along the side of our building. I didn't know if you were aware of that.
Your 5-foot easement in favor of your property was officially terminated and recorded. We have a 5-foot easement in favor of our property on your property.
Oh, really?
It was done as part of the Northgate condominium withdrawal.
I've never seen that, so
I could supply it to you
okay,
afterwards.
because I have the documents that show it's still inactive, it's still active.
Okay, that's fine.
Because that was our question, because we,
We have a construction easement for both property lines. I think it's on, I think it's like 5 feet on the other side and 5 feet on yours. It was part of, the Northgate's previous developer, wanted to encourage development and marketability of the site. So when they terminated everything, they recorded these easements in favor of this site after all the other projects were done.
okay. Because at one point in time, we were being requested to sign off to do away with those easements, and none of us signed it, so I'm not sure how that happened. So,
Okay.
yeah, I'd like to
Yeah.
see those documents.
Okay,
Because
they're
we
public.
have no way to get to the brick on our building for maintenance, if you're up against it.
Yeah,
So-
that is a typical condition in
Sure.
Lancaster to have
Sure,
lot
sure.
line walls, and that's something that many cities, deal with. It's not unusual, and it would be handled respectfully,
Okay, sure.
of course.
Yeah, I'd like to see that, though, because I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, of
The
course.
documents I still have show a 5-foot easement.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Anyone else?
Did you want to talk about easements and planning or
Sorry.
My name's Dave Cassidy. I live at 336 North Christian Street with my wife. And am I understanding you correctly, there's the easement that we had from the Northgate parking lot going to Lemon Street no longer exists,
That would exist, and it's being maintained.
and that is being maintained?
We're maintaining it, absolutely.
And how wide is that?
So the easement that I think you're referring to is there was an emergency access easement. And so we have worked through discussions with the Fire Bureau on what that really was identified for, what exactly it was meant to do. And the one thing that we've come back to is fire apparatus access to the, and I'll go back to the site plan. I think I'm headed the wrong direction. So what the Fire Bureau would like is they would like to have fire apparatus access through to get to this point,
Okay,
to actually fight a fire that might happen back in here. And so what we've agreed to is a 20-foot wide, 13-foot 6 high access easement that comes through this site. We're providing access to this gate so that they can come through and get to this point. You will have to provide access at this gate, because I think this is your gate, for them to come through and actually have access into this site. That did result in us having to make the building approximately 2 or 3 feet taller so we could get the headroom to get into the site, through this entrance and to get underneath the structure and so forth. But we are providing that access.
now I'm not sure I understand you correctly. So is the building going to be notched?
Yeah.
So
So-
that the fire truck can get underneath the building to get to the other line?
I'll go to the elevation.
Through the garage door, through the drive aisle. They will have access, to the garage door.
One of my concerns would
Right
be,
there.
if they're worried about the fire truck getting from Lemon Street to Northgate, what if those units above that are on fire, and how's that problem resolved in terms of the fire department being able to address those particular areas that are burning?
In our building,
Yes,
they would be fighting that fire from Lemon Street.
So-
from Lemon Street.
Not from under our building.
Okay, but if it's from Lemon Street, how are they getting to the back of the building?
So I don't want to speak for the Fire Bureau, but I know we've had ongoing discussions with the fire chief on exactly how he wanted to get access to this particular site, and not only to our site, but to the site beyond our site, which is the access easement that you're talking about. They would never want to have a piece of equipment behind our building to fight a fire in our building. They would run hoses from the street to get behind the building. I mean, that's my understanding. But again, I'm not the fire chief, and I can say that we've had discussions both with the building department and the fire bureau about this.
I guess the simplest way to say it is the fire department has reviewed this particular question, and they are not concerned about it. And the fire department is overly cautious with things like this. Not the opposite. They're not risk takers. So they feel comfortable with this arrangement for fire control.
All right, I'll take your word for that. The other question I did have is if you only have 15 parking spaces, and some of these units are going to have multiple cars, I'm sure, are they going to be zoned to park on Lemon Street? Are they going to be zoned to park on Queen Street? Or are they going to be forced to utilize the garages, the parking garages? And I envision, and don't know, but I do envision that many of them will opt out of paying that fee and park on Lemon Street. And now you've got anywhere from 40 to 70 additional cars parked in that area.
We have not requested any street parking permits for our residents to hand out as free parking. Our residents will either park in the lot for the 15 spaces, or will go to those garages. We envision it to be the likely renter to be a less car-dependent person due to the nature of them wanting to live in the downtown. There's a new garage that was obviously just built with the library in it, two blocks south of us. There's a garage around on the corner, and parking is kept at a $50 rate as of now, which is not unaffordable for parking for a monthly parking pass. I don't see them foregoing a $50 fee. It's
Okay, I choose to differ with that statement, but thank you.
Yeah, a couple of parking tickets will fix it. Anybody else?
Is it 60? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's
Let
it's
the
gone up.
record be
Yeah,
corrected.
like everything
65.
else.
I'm so
Yeah, we're
sorry.
up to 65 or something.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. All right, any other comments or questions from the commission? If not, is there a motion for this project? Oh, here you go. I didn't have it either.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend the City Council approve a certificate of appropriateness for the proposed new construction to construct a new 7-story multifamily residential building at the corner of North Queen and East Lemon Streets to include ground-level commercial space, screened surface parking, a rooftop terrace, and an attached stair tower per the submitted architectural plans and proposed building materials. This work meets the Secretary of Interior Standards number 9 and the design standards.
Is there a second? Any comments? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay, I will oppose based on my comments earlier. So motion passes 4-1. We are recommending body, and Suzanne, what is the time frame for city council next month?
The next opportunity is December 13th, which is actually 3 weeks from now. And I'll send you the motion language, and I'll remind you of the meeting agenda.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it. All right, the other application for tonight, Yeah. And we got some people exiting too. Will be West James Street.
But this is not comparable in my view.
All right, well, you're setting up, this was here, this property was in front of the Historic Commission previously. Was that the one that was in February? Okay.
I knew I read that somewhere.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. That was the marathon session. Okay. Suzanne, do you have any comments on this one before they present?
As we mentioned, the conceptual discussion in February was for a very different project, for a 5 to 6 story multifamily building. So this is revised. Now, you are still presenting the plans that you submitted to me? Okay, you didn't make major, okay. Do you want me to go over my reviews?
Yes, if you can do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
They actually have 3 demolition requests and 1 new construction request. The first demolition is to remove the 1-story modern commercial building at 211 West James Street, which now contains a vacant lighting fixture store to allow new construction at the site. And my review for that is appropriate with conditions. The existing modern building, converted from a convenience store, does not enhance its prominent location at the intersection of 3 streets and includes a surface parking lot facing West James. So I said the demolition is appropriate conditional upon the Commission's recommendation of approval for the 1-story commercial building being proposed for this location. And this review references standard number 1. And the second demolition request is to remove the rear Ls of 3 connected row houses, is 217, 219, and 221 West James, west of the corner site. And my review is again appropriate with conditions with more information on the site use. And I state that the rear Ls are original to these circa 1895 houses, so the wings have the same historic significance as the main front blocks, although without a direct streetscape impact or the same level of architectural detail. Removal of the wings will alter the building's original footprints and configurations and will likely limit any potential for future reuse as housing. During the conceptual discussion, plans showed use of these combined units for a deli and dry goods storage. So the applicant should clarify the intended use of the interior space for this new revised project. Then I state that the removal of the rear wings is again appropriate conditional upon the Commission's recommendation of approval for the new construction proposed in item 4.4. And this review references standards 1 and 2. And the third demolitioner's request is for a 3-standing, currently an apartment building at 227 West James Street, again, a little bit further west of the row houses. My review for that is inappropriate. The existing building is a contributing resource in Lancaster's National Register Historic District, so it does have historic significance. There is no proposed use of the cleared parcel other than a green plot, and removal will not support rehab of a more significant historic building or allow significant new construction at this specific site, which is generally the rationale the Commission will look for when there's a demolition request. The application states the building is unsafe to occupy And while there was a submitted engineer's report describing deteriorated conditions, primarily water damage, it did not include any cost estimates to repair the building, which is requested in question 4C of the demolition application. Then there was a reference that the building is isolated, but it has always been a freestanding structure. And while it is now surrounded by driveways and surface parking on both the east and west side, the south side of West James retains a more or less contiguous row of housing. So retention of this building will maintain the prevailing historic residential character of this block of West James. The proposed demolition will not directly support redevelopment of another historic building. It's not an integral part of the deli proposed in item 4.4, and the Historical Commission has generally not supported removal of historic structures with no defined use for the cleared site. So not on that basis, the proposed demolition is inappropriate without more thorough documentation that the building cannot be retained and repaired, or a clearer proposal for usage of this part of the overall project site. And this review references standard number 1. Then the item for new construction is at the proposed corner of Harrisburg Avenue, Water Street, and West James. My review for that is appropriate with modifications. The proposed one-story delicatessen is designed functionally and stylistically as an extension of the existing restaurant at 216 Harrisburg Avenue, just to the west. It will replace the current 1978 store, which was built as a convenience store, mini mart. And this structure would introduce, the proposed new structure would introduce a more contemporary design with glass curtain walls and modern materials. So overall, the proposed new building is not inappropriate in design per the standards. But I note that it does, however, represent a missed opportunity to make greater use of this prominent corner site or improve upon the character of a significant corridor through the city. The design retains the surface parking lot along West James and is not well integrated with the 3-story row houses to be retained to the west. Despite its contemporary materials, the structure also does not have a strong urban character and perhaps reinforces the weakest aspects of the built environment in this area of Harrisburg Avenue. While the 5 to 6-story multifamily dwelling proposed during the conceptual discussion in February overwhelmed the surrounding context, the building proposed here perhaps underwhelms its location. And a revised structure that would maximize the potential of this site and introduce a building that was better integrated within the mixed-use neighborhood would be more appropriate. And this review references the design standards in the ordinance.
Thank you, Suzanne. All right, if you want to introduce yourself and reintroduce the project, I guess, and go through what you have, appreciate it.
Are we on?
Yes.
My name is Eric Endress, and this is Brent Stebbins. We are both partners with RLPS Architects. We are here to present an exciting project for Sam Lombardo that restores and updates residential housing on the property, provides a variety of new indoor, outdoor dining options within the city, adds a neighborhood delicatessen, and we feel the project is a meaningful investment into the city of Lancaster. Joining us today are Joel Callahan from SN Lombardo Capital and Mike Davis from Barley Snyder. The project program has changed since the preliminary submission that was reviewed in January, so we'll go through that at some point tonight. The program you see before you was reviewed and received a recommendation for approval from the City of Lancaster Zoning Hearing Board on October 24th. So this is the same plans that we presented there. The project site is a wedge-shaped site bounded by Harrisburg Avenue to the north, a small section of North Water Street to the east, West James Street to the south. This was historically an industrial area located along the railroad lines. Through the 1890s, the south side of the 200 block of Harrisburg Avenue contained many collections of one-story, two-story brick buildings. Framed houses were likely located along the north side of the 200 block of the West James Street, including one-story frame grocery store on the corner of North Water Street. There's a variety of architectural styles surrounding the site representing different periods of architecture that you see represented above. including these structures that are immediately adjacent to and are on the Lombardo property. The project site is surrounded by a mix of residential and commercial properties that are 1, 2, and 3-story structures. This is a plan of West James Street. The pink boxes represent structures that are currently existing along West James Street. The hatched boxes represent structures that have been removed but were on the historic maps of the city. Next, you'll see the red hatched boxes. Those are the areas that we are recommending or requesting permission for demolition, either partial or full demolition of buildings. The blue boxes are a slight adjustment to what was submitted, clarifying our submission to include portions of the buildings that will be renovated. Starting to the far right on West James Street is 211 West James Street, the existing Penn Lighting building. It's a brick-faced CMU structure circa 1978 as a convenience store, fronted with surface parking located to the south on West James Street, and there's a polygon addition on the east side of the building. I'm just going to run through what exists and then come back and go through recommendations. What we are asking for are, The City of Lancaster staff stated in their report that based on the age, the Penn Lighting Building is a non-contributing resource for the National Register District. The owner proposes a selective demolition, a portion of the structure to utilize and utilization of other portions of the structure. So it's not a complete demolition of the Penn Lighting Building. The proposed new use is a 1-story delicatessen, which is similar to the original 1-story grocery store. West of Penn Lighting Building are 3 row homes located at 217, 219, and 221 West James. The triplex is a 3-story wood frame structure with a brick facade. There is a unifying front porch, and each apartment has rear Ls. The owner intends to continue the use of the structure as residential apartments, just to clarify that point that was asked. The owner is proposing to remove a portion of the rear Ls of the building as shown in blue, or shown in red. Blue sections are proposed to remain. This is a subtle modification from the submission that was sent in was sent in for review, but does match what was presented to the zoning hearing. The owner has not settled on the final interior plan layouts for the apartments, and that's why we had a varying diagrams for what was being removed on the back of the project. Demo of the rear Ls from each unit creates space for restaurant expansion. The front elevation will be stabilized and restored. We will review this in more detail in a moment. The building is considered to be structurally sound. West of the triplex is the 3-story wood frame brick structure at 227 West James. There were several buildings on both sides of 227 that have been raised, and you can see those. They're hatched 2 structures that are 223, 225, 229, and 231. The structure itself architecturally is not unique to the region. It very much agrees with and looks like many of the other residential buildings that are up and down the street.